Great. Okay, fab. We are officially streaming live on YouTube.
Right.
Welcome to everybody watching live. I'd be impressed if anyone is live immediately, but welcome to everyone watching, maybe watching it back once we've gone live. Thank you for joining me for another week of the Bookwanderers Club. I am delighted to be here for the first. Oh, I'm just going to mute me in the past me on YouTube. Yeah, I'm delighted to be here with Justin Somper, author of the Vampirates. I was checking about how to pronounce this earlier. Vampirates series. The format's going to be as usual for the Bookwanderers Club. And so as everyone is getting online, I'm going to ask Justin just to say hi, give us a very quick introduction to the series, and he's going to give us a reading from the first book, which I should say has been, the first 3 books have just been reissued with particularly snazzy new covers.
Well, look, here they are.
What a coincidence.
I know, I just happen to have them to hand, always. Yes, gorgeous covers, which I'm indebted to my publisher UClan for. Okay, so what do you need to know about the Vampirates books? Well, the first thing, I guess, is they are set 500 years in the future. There has been global warming, the ocean levels have risen, and so there is this whole new dawn of piracy. The oceans are teeming with pirate ships, many of them affiliated to the Pirate Federation, but there's at least one other mysterious ship which has been sailing largely undetected through time, and this ship, we will come to learn, is called the Nocturne, and it is home to vampire pirates or Vampirates. The first book in the sequence is this one, Demons of the Ocean. And in this, we meet the heroes of the story, who are 14-year-old twins, Connor and Grace Tempest. They are growing up in a lighthouse on the east coast of Australia. And very close to the beginning of the story, Grace and Connor go out in their dad's old sailing boat into the sea, and they're caught in a very sudden and terrible storm. They are shipwrecked and thrown into the water and separated from each other. And I will read a very brief extract, which shows what happens next. The storm was still raging, but quieter now. Connor scanned the bubbling water, looking for his sister's face amid the debris. She wasn't there. Gaining control of the makeshift surfboard, he moved through the water, looking for any sign of her, but there was none. He lost track of how long he drifted for. It seemed an eternity, but it might only have been a few seconds, stretched out of all recognition through despair and fatigue. Now the mist was thinning. Through it, he could see the shadow of a ship. It was faint, but he couldn't miss the outline. It was like an old galleon. He'd seen such things in books and as a model at the Maritime Museum. He must be imagining it, hallucinating as death approached. But no, it was a ship. As the mist began to lift, he could see it quite clearly, turning in the water. Why was it changing direction in the middle of the ocean? Was it stopping for some reason? Had it come to rescue him? Buoyed up by the thought, he used his remaining strength to wave his arms in the air and cry out hoarsely, "Over here, over here!" The ship continued to turn, but it wasn't coming for him. He could see nobody on board, and no one had seen him. The mist had lifted to the level of the deck. As the ship completed its turn, a soft golden light fell on the ship's figurehead, a young woman. If only she were a real woman instead of a painted sculpture. Her piercing eyes seemed to watch him, but of course they were nothing more than daubs of paint on wood. Connor was at a loss what to do as the ship began to move off into the distance. As it sailed away, he made out sails unlike any he had seen before. They were like wings glimmering with thin veins of light. "Hey," Connor called again, "help!" But his voice was weak, and the ship was already much too far away. All he could make out was the dark silhouette of its strange tattered sails. They seemed to flap gently as the ship made its way. It seemed as if rather than sailing through the rough ocean, this ship was merely skimming the surface, unaffected by the strong currents. His mind must be playing tricks on him. Or is it?
Fabulous, thank you. Excellent excellent taster of what's to come. So I guess just to go right back to the beginning, it would be great to know how the kind of idea first kind of came to you. Was it one of the siblings? Was it the pirates? Like, what were one of the settings? What was the kind of seed of the whole thing?
The seed of the whole thing was sort of entirely straightforward and very magical. It was just the word Vampirates kind of dropping into my head like some kind of apple out of the sky. I can vaguely remember where I was when it happened, which is in the vicinity of Crouch End, where I live and have lived for a long time. And I mean, literally, Anna, you know, 1 minute it wasn't there, the next minute, Vampirates, it's there, and it's sort of pulsing away. And you know, what I loved about it was the word already felt at that point like it could be in a dictionary. It just, you know what it is, and it feels very concrete. So I had that thing, you know, sort of tingles at the back of my neck and spine. This is the idea I've been waiting for. And then the somewhat scary realization that I knew nothing about vampires and even less about pirates. So this might be a little bit of a challenge.
Well, I was going to ask you about kind of like building the kind of mythology around them, and if you like what research you've done into real pirates, and I won't say real, but as in existing kind of vampire mythology. Did you do a lot of reading research, and is any of it rooted in kind of real myths and legends that you discovered?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you know, once I got rid of those jitters and thought, you know, let's just get to grips with this. I did quite a lot of research into vampire myth on the one hand and pirate history on the other. And really all the time was sort of looking at ways I might be able to join the two of those together, because I was in this very fortunate position that nobody had ever done this before. So I tended to avoid reading or watching a lot of other vampire fiction or vampire TV shows or movies, and to stick to sort of vampire encyclopedias, as it were. But I think one of the things that I quickly found, which was incredibly helpful, was that both with vampires and with pirates, they pretty much exist in every culture around the world. So it felt like it was a very global idea from the beginning. And also, and I didn't have any idea of this at the beginning, but they really have existed through each time period as well. So I quickly got a sense that it was a very big idea and there was a lot of flexibility to it. So I could kind of decide where I wanted to set it and when. And actually, I had to kind of make those decisions to kind of make the idea a bit more concrete again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny you talk about like I just the side effects of lockdown. I've been rewatching all the Pirates of the Caribbean films on Disney Plus.
Okay.
How do you because obviously both, as you say, like why it's so brilliant is that vampirates are like their own thing, but vampires and pirates, as you say, are so sort of rooted in kind of loads of different cultures. Do you have any favorite either vampire or pirate kind of cult, like books, films that you particularly enjoy, or people who've enjoyed your books might also enjoy reading or watching?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. As I say, on the whole, I tended to avoid books and films that sort of were swimming in similar waters, as it were.
Right.
However, I found I couldn't entirely avoid True Blood, because I was
True Blood,
you know, very, very drawn to it. And it was interesting for me, actually. I suppose also I was quite a way into my sequence. I think I was around maybe book 4 or book 5 by the time that came in. So I felt like the world of my books was quite well established.
Right.
But it was very interesting sort of watching that and seeing another writer and a team of writers who were clearly wrestling with the same turf that I was, and often coming up with quite a different interpretation, but sometimes we got quite close. So for instance, in the 5th book in the Vampire sequence, Empire of Night, there's a dinner party, which is, I think it's called like the pink dinner, and all the food is pink tinged in my book. And that's because there's blood in absolutely everything that's being offered, but it's sort of very elegant dinner party. And I was watching True Blood one time, and lo and behold, a very similar dinner happened. And that was actually really quite nice, because I thought, oh, okay, we've both sort of had this germ of an idea, and we've gone with it.
Yeah. I feel like I should just say, because I know we have some quite young viewers, True Blood is for grown-ups, very much so. So just to be very clear on that one.
Read Vampirates in the meantime.
Yes, start with the Vampirates, and when you're over 18, maybe. True Blood is great fun, but definitely for adults.
Absolutely. And I guess on the pirate side of things, I mean, I ruthlessly avoided Pirates of the Caribbean for obvious reasons, because you don't, even if you're not consciously influenced, you don't want to be subconsciously influenced.
For sure.
But I do have a lingering affection for Captain Hook in Peter Pan, and indeed Peter Pan as a whole story. And I love that sense with Peter Pan at the end of the story, that you've got that disconnect between Peter, who's immortal and he's always going to be a boy, and Wendy, who's now a young woman. I mean, I think those are, that's one of the most heartbreaking endings of a book ever. And that disconnect is something I also really enjoyed in Doctor Who, say with the David Tennant years, with his relationship with Rose. So those are kind of things that I guess I've responded to in the relationships between the vampire characters and the mortal characters.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? Because when you write about something, it tends to be because you're fascinated by it or you love it. And I certainly have the thing of I love reading books about like magical books and libraries, but now I write about that. I very actively avoid reading it because of the same reasons. And I have a stack of children's books that are kind of about magical books or libraries that I am desperate to read, but I just feel like I need to get further into my series before I can risk it.
Yeah, well, I share your pain. I mean, for me, I had to do that. So I think you're making the right decision. But it's annoying.
Yeah, it is. I wanted to ask you just a little bit more about Connor and Grace, your main characters, who, as you've said, are siblings. And I love reading sibling relationships in books. And I wanted to ask kind of why you decided to make them siblings rather than friends, and kind of what sort of fun for you as a writer about having that sibling dynamic to play with.
Well, I'm one of 4 siblings.
Okay.
I'm the baby of the family.
Okay.
And I guess, like everyone, I've kind of wondered from time to time what it would be like to be a twin. And, there are all these interesting stories around twins and this sort of psychic connection that they have. And I thought that sort of the potential for the psychic connection could be really useful within this story, because as you'll have gathered, the twins are separated quite early on. I always wanted this to be a book that could be enjoyed by readers irrespective of gender. So, I was determined that, the female characters were going to stand shoulder to shoulder with the male characters, which is one of the reasons why I set the story in the future, actually, because sort of inspiration of female pirates from the past were a bit thin on the ground, with some exceptions.
There's some cool female pirates in the past, yeah.
There are some good ones, but it sort of took me a while to find them while I was researching them. But yeah, so I guess sort of jumping back to Grace and Connor, they're all, initially they seem like they're sort of 2 halves of a whole in a way. He's very physical, she's very cerebral. On the face of it, he seems like he's the strong one. But actually, she has this real inner strength and determination and bravery that quickly comes to the fore. Yeah, I kind of went with that. And then it was only really around book 3 that I came up with the reality, oh my gosh, I'm writing a dual narrative, which is why the books get a little bit longer, because I'm following Connor and then I'm following Grace, and then I'm getting intrigued by the other characters, the supporting characters. So it becomes a bigger proposition.
Yeah. Speaking of Grace, I think now might be a nice moment to do your second reading.
Lovely. Okay. Well, I don't need to preface this really. She's waking up somewhere in some kind of a ship. Grace was awakened by the sound of a bell tolling. Like the captain's whisper, each toll seemed to seep into every chamber and crevice of her brain. Opening her eyes, she found herself in a 4-poster bed. She was propped up amid a sea of fresh white pillows and tucked under the softest sheets she'd ever felt. She lay there for a moment, utterly still. The sound of the bell gave way to a strange music, punctuated by a rhythmic, almost tribal drumming. Her arms were bare, and lifting the sheets, she saw that her old, wet clothes had been removed, and she was wearing a pretty cotton nightdress embroidered in intricate detail. Where had it come from? Who did it belong to? And who, she wondered with a touch of embarrassment, had undressed her? The music was growing louder. Easing herself up onto her elbows, she glanced about the room. It was lit with candles in glass lanterns, which cast the softest light, flickering across the wooden walls and floorboards. As she set her feet on the floor, the ship rocked to one side. It took her a moment or two to get her balance. She stepped away from the bed, noticing that the wooden posts ended in intricate carvings. The canopy above the bed was heavily embroidered. To one side was a small open washroom with a china basin and a jug of water. Everything in the cabin seemed exotic and luxurious. Perhaps these items had been acquired on the ship's many voyages, she thought. Outside, she heard voices above the persistent music. She turned towards them. She saw there was a curtain evidently covering a porthole. A note had been pinned onto the curtain, and she stepped closer to read it. Grace, please keep this curtain drawn at all times for your own safety. Your friend, Lorcan Fury. His writing was rather old-fashioned, but wild. He'd used a fountain pen and ink had splattered over the page. What did he mean by for your own safety? Both the words and the apparently hurried fashion in which they'd been written made her shiver. She reached for the curtain. It was so very tempting to ignore Lorcan's request. Something the captain had said earlier came back to her. We don't want the others to know about this. But who were the others? What kind of ship was this? Just then, she caught a snatch of conversation right outside the porthole. I have such a hunger tonight. As do I. I have never needed the feast as much as tonight. The feast. The captain had mentioned that too. It was clearly an important and eagerly awaited event. The crew sounded extremely hungry. Perhaps they hadn't eaten properly for some time. Maybe the ship had only just stocked up on fresh provisions.
Brilliant. Thank you. Right, before I sort of ask some questions that are coming in, and for people who are watching live, do pop your questions into the live chat. I have a couple of kind of more sort of reading-y related questions. So firstly, as this is the Bookwanderers Club.
Yes.
So if you could book wander, if you could travel inside of books and you were going to travel inside of one of your own books, which scene would you choose to go into?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I'd love to do that, actually. There are many scenes I'd like to go into. Well, I think possibly, just picking up from the extract that I've just read, Feast Night is coming to the Vampirate ship, and it is a night of some jeopardy, but also amazing ceremony. So I think I would love to go onto the Vampirate ship and experience Feast Night, but at a safe distance.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. And with book wandering, as long as you have the book with you, you can remove yourself as soon as you want. So
okay, good.
Key thing, you just need to make sure you keep the book with you so you can, because I half of my favorite books I'd be far too scared to actually go and book wander inside of them.
It would be amazing, wouldn't it? I mean, of course, you know, you do live inside these books, so you know it is kind of like a movie that's playing in your own head. So you know, you feel those scenes, but yes, to actually go one better would be amazing.
Yeah. And my next question, which I've been asking everyone, is if you were going to host a dinner party and you could invite 3 authors, living or dead, to come, who would you choose to invite?
A socially remote and responsible dinner party, of course.
Yes.
Okay, first one, I would like to invite Tim Winton, the Australian author who writes both for kids and for adults.
Yeah.
And his book Cloud Street is one of my most favorite books in the world. It has been for over 20 years. And I've been lucky enough to meet him a couple of times briefly, but it would be lovely to have dinner with him. and preferably actually in Australia, because he lives in a really nice surfing town. So, so maybe we could locate ourselves there.
Yeah.
I think I'd also like to invite Kate Atkinson.
Oh,
Because she's just, is she the most brilliant writer writing today? I think there's a good argument for that. You know, she's incredibly smart and clever, but she's also brilliantly funny. You know, I recently read her book, Big Sky, and I'm about to start transcription. And one of the advantages of lockdown for me has been having a little bit of extra reading time. So, so Kate would be invited to the surfy town for dinner as well. And I think to give us a bit of a laugh, I'm going to have David Sedaris.
Okay, good call. Yeah.
Because, I mean, he just makes me laugh out loud from the page, or if I'm listening in audiobook or on the radio. I thought his collection last year, Calypso, is possibly my favorite book of last year. It's just so masterful, these short stories, and as you're reading them, you're thinking, oh, I wonder if I could just turn episodes from my life and my family into these amazingly funny, visceral stories. But of course, that's the art to it. It's just so clever. So those three, I think. So I feel really intimidated at the dinner party.
But I think those are excellent choices. I might try and get an invite to that one as well.
You're absolutely welcome. There'll be prawns, I think, big prawns.
Right, I want to make sure you have time to ask some questions that people are asking live. So I think a good one to start with is Alana has asked which age group your books are for.
Okay, well, I think they're broadly called middle grade books, possibly sort of towards the top end of middle grade. Readers tend to be sort of 9 or 10 when they come into the sequence. And you know, broadly sort of 12, 13, I would say. But, you know, I have readers who carry on with them into their teenage years. But I'd say probably the bulk of readers are between about 10 and 14.
Fab. So Daniel, who is a bookseller, thanks for
Hi, Daniel.
tuning in, Daniel, has asked about what your writing process is like. And actually, this is something I wanted to know as well, because when you write a series, I think it's fascinating knowing like how much kind of you have planned in advance and how you kind of grapple with that. So I'm piggybacking on Daniel's question there as well.
Okay, thank you. Well, I guess in terms of the planning and the improvisation, you know, originally when the books were commissioned, they were commissioned from the 8 chapters of writing and then some synopses of the first 4 books. So I did have to come up with some sort of outline plans for the 4 books. But of course, the beauty is, as you keep going, the story grows and the character grows and it becomes a much more complex and rich mix. So you can then deviate somewhat. I did find, you know, I mentioned earlier about the books becoming a bit longer as Grace and Connor go off on different adventures, and there's more characters in the story. So I became quite hooked on planning the books out with big sheets of graph paper and post-it notes representing different characters or different sides of the story. Because I didn't want to go into a cul-de-sac that would sort of get me to a dead end. But equally, you know, these stories can't go on and be too massive or no one's going to publish them. But I like the room for improvisation as well. So I'm working on something new at the moment, and I'm doing the planning still. So, you know, I've planned out the first third of the book and I've got post-it notes there. But I think it's good to sort of trust that the story will tell you where it needs to go and the characters will. If you work out everything, it can be a little bit deadening, I think.
Yeah. Sophie would like to know what your favorite book as a child was.
Oh, I had so many favorite books as a child. I mean, you know, Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, obviously. The Secret Garden, which makes a little cameo appearance in one of my own books. I was addicted to Helen Cresswell's Bagthorpe Saga, which I just think are these brilliant, funny books about families and family disputes and stuff. So they were firm favorites. And I love mystery stories and adventures. So like the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. I think I've got, to this day, I've got most of both of those sequences somewhere.
Yeah, fab. Alice, who is 6.
Hi, Alice.
So I think we sort of covered this at the start, but just I want to make sure I ask Alice's question. So Alice says that she just wrote a fact file on pirates for school. And what made you choose vampires to mix pirates with?
Oh, Alice. Well, I would love to see your fact file on pirates and see if I can glean any information about them from you. The inspiration, as I touched on before, was really the word vampirates just coming into my head. So I knew nothing about pirates. I hadn't even thought about them for many a year. It was just the word that made me combine them. But then once I'd done that, I thought, oh, I might sort of take this a stage further. So I thought I also quite like cowboys, and I liked watching stuff about cowboys when I was a kid. So I thought, I wonder if I could do a cowboy vampire pirate and what that would look like. But it took me until the 3rd book, Blood Captain, to get Johnny Desperado into the story. But he is indeed this cowboy or vaquero vampire character.
Awesome. Right, just got time to squeeze a few more in. Adam would like to know, speaking of kind of piratey pop culture, Adam would like to know if you like Muppet Treasure Island.
I like pretty much everything that the Muppets do. It's fair to say, yes, absolutely. Now that is a pirate movie I can get behind for sure.
Yeah. Do you know what? Actually, I recently rewatched that because the main effect of me rewatching Pirates of the Caribbean was that it just made me want to watch Muppet Treasure Island instead.
All routes lead back to the Muppets.
Yeah. And Daniel, picking up on what you just said, can you tell us anything about what you're working on now?
Ooh, well, I'm a little bit superstitious about talking about things. I wonder if you're the same.
Yeah, maybe here's a question I've asked to someone who can't tell. Can you give us one word, either to do with the tone or the topic, just like a one word teaser?
Yes, I can. Curfew.
Ooh, I like that. No, I get that. I don't like talking about books until they're like, my 3rd book is coming out in September. It's in like line edits, and I still get very nervous when anyone asks me about what it's about, in case, I don't know, it's a weird thing, isn't it? It's completely fixed.
What I can say, Anna, which won't necessarily surprise people, is the new book is very much about this interplay between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. And again, you know, this is not something that I sort of set out to make my theme, but it seems to kind of keep coming back at me. So I don't know what's going on, but I'm just rolling with it.
Yeah, fab. Right, I'm aware that we are running out of time, so I'm going to kind of finish with our usual closing questions. So penultimately, as always, I'm asking authors to recommend some of their favorite bookshops, and I know that Justin's got some good ones because we actually live in a similar neck of the woods in North London, so I can vouch for a couple of the bookshops that are coming up. But yeah, so Justin, do you want to share some of your favorites?
Yeah, well, as you say, North London, we're incredibly well versed for great bookshops, particularly specialist kids ones. So I have Pickled Pepper Books just around the corner from me. That's a bit of a tongue twister. I also love the Bookworm in Temple Fortune, managed by the wonderful Ruth. Further afield, I have done some brilliant events with Booker in Oswestry and with Simply Books in Bramhall in Cheshire. I am a big fan of Daunt's Bookshop in Marylebone. It's probably one of my favourite central London bookshops for going in. I can't leave there without at least 3 books, I'm afraid. And I love visiting bookshops by the coast. I can't think why. So Book Nook in Hove would be another firm favourite.
Fab. And actually, I hadn't asked, this is another question from Adam, but just linked to the sea, actually, I am curious, because he'd asked, do you sail, or do you have boat experience yourself?
No, this is another thing I'm incredibly ignorant about. You know, again, what a brilliant idea this was. It's all about stuff I don't know, but that's, you know, that's part of the joy of writing. My dad, who sadly died while I was writing the first book, but he, no, that's not true. I finished the book and he died shortly afterwards. But he was into sailing, so he knew an awful lot about sailing. And the early chapters where Grace and Connor are going out to sea, he read them and said to me, oh, you could just change this or change that. This is the kind of things that you'd be working out when you were just going onto a boat. So that really got me on to a good start. But as I say, sadly, he died shortly after the first book was finished. So then I was kind of on my own to work it out. But one of these days, I would love to go off and do some sailing classes, or, you know, a real sailing adventure.
Yeah. Right, to finish us off for today's episode, we're going to finish, as we always do, with a writing prompt, and hopefully you've been inspired by listening to Justin chat about his books and his writing. Justin's actually been doing loads of writing challenges, and I'm going to link to where you can find out about all of those in the description box. But he's picked out a specific shiny new one for you today. So over to you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Well, my challenge today is I want you to think about a school for pirates. So in my books, I have Pirate Academy, but I want you to think about your very own school for pirates, and I want you to give it an amazing piratical name. So for instance, you know, Blackbeard School for brutes, rogues, and vagabonds could be an option, but I want to hear what you guys come up with.
Amazing. That's fabulous. I'm going to have a think about what mine will be called. Great, and as I said, I'll leave a link to all the other writing challenges that Justin has been doing, and if you'd like to share your school name, I'll also link to where you can find Justin on Twitter if you'd like to kind of share your ideas there. Right, that is all we have got time for. As always, everything we've chatted about, I will pop into the description box in a moment. I will be back on Wednesday with Jenny Spangler, who's the author of The Vanishing Trick, which is the current Waterstones Children's Book of the Month, and on Friday with Michelle Harrison, live at 2 p.m. as always. Thank you to everyone who's been watching and asking questions, and the biggest thank you of all is to Justin for joining us and answering all your questions and all my questions. Thank you so much, Justin.
Thanks for having me.